get my 6. You hear that? Potentially, it's a him, her, it, or a they. Took me a while to creep up here this afternoon because something was creeping along behind me in the forest. I still have not yet seen it. And I'm going to be reading another totally awesome Halloween themed story from October Nights Part 2, 31 More Tales for the Halloween season. So you're going to have to be the one to look back there while I look at the book and read the story. Timestamp anything you see. By the way, major announcement. 8 months in the wait. Bigfoot Sasquatch Files Volume 14 has finally been released. It's available on Amazon in print or Kindle as of right now. The link's in the description box below, and from that link you can also get this sucker. You can get this with an autograph from our Etsy store. That link's in the description box below as well. Many of the stories in Bigfoot Sasquatch Files Volume 14 were submitted from viewers like you, and potentially, I love that word, there's just a certain ring to it. Potentially, you, if you submitted a story, remember the email. It's crazylake@mail.com. If you have any stories associated with the paranormal, supernatural, cryptozoological, etc., UFOs, aliens, alien abduction, terrible things your in-laws used to do to you, I tell you, people, whatever, the creepiest bipedal creature on this planet, if you ask me. And it basically just goes back to attitude. I mean, some people just have really crappy attitudes, and I don't understand why. There's just no need. There's just no need to be an a-hole. I mean, somebody recently commented or emailed or something about how they hate me so much. They've watched my videos for years, and the highlight of their day is to sit around in the evenings with a bag of popcorn and a can of Natural Light beer and pick apart my videos and find out where the fakery is and where the lies are, and they just can't wait for the next one because they hate me so much. As crazy as that sounds, I'll tell you, when we're at a point with this channel when we're going viral, because it's all based upon the algorithm. Sometimes we hit it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're in fashion, sometimes we're not. I don't care anymore because I don't need to care anymore. We're very stable. But my point to that is, during those viral times when we're getting tons of views, we get more people like that. And it's just creepy. That's crazy. Life is such a beautiful thing. Look at this background behind me. Why sit in front of your computer to watch some dude you don't know, you'll never meet, because you hate him so much, when you could go out and walk around in this, you know, or you could just watch an ASMR video. I think somebody's getting restless, so I will get on to the story. But this story does kind of have to do with just being an a-hole, and it shows how it just doesn't pay. Just doesn't pay. While you're eating your popcorn and drinking your Natty Light, hating me, I don't know, because if I'm not, here doing my job all of 25 minutes a day, I'm spending time with my beautiful wife, my wonderful, healthy son, just enjoying life because I know how beautiful it is. And I've spent time in those ugly places. I've been where you are. Ain't worth it, brah. Ain't worth it. Life is just too beautiful. Just too beautiful. And in time, the energies you put out there come back at you. You don't want to be an a-hole. And our story for today, October 22, Whistling Willie the Whittler, bloop, 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 tongue twister. It's proof of that. I don't want to scream because I want us to be able to listen for those footsteps. I'm going to move you up a little bit closer here. Popcorn and Natural Light to watch a guy you can't even stand. Man, what a miserable childhood some people must have had. Tree knocks. Anna Marie made her way past Whistling Willie's house, just as she did every morning on her way to the bus stop. She looked over toward the house as she did, and there was Willie, sitting on his porch, whistling and whittling, as per his usual. She knew that when she came back by in the afternoon after school was over and she was returning home, he'd be there still, just whistling and whittling and minding his own business. Anna Marie raised her right hand to wave hello to Willie just like she did every morning, and as she would do later in the afternoon, just as she did every afternoon, and the ballet shoes that she'd had draped over her left shoulder fell off. "Oh," she said, squatting down to pick them up. She draped them back over her shoulder, stood, and continued waving. Her face had never lost its smile. "Hi there, little Anna Marie," Willie said from the porch. His words were in rhythm with the tune he'd been whistling, and he went right back into whistling the same old tune as soon as he'd finished speaking. Anna Marie made her way past Willie's house, and Willie adjusted his sitting position in his old hickory porch chair, handmade and by him many years before, and continued whittling. He would be 80 years old on his next birthday, and he had no other way he preferred to pass the time in his golden years. He was a widower, his adult children were scattered around the country, and sometimes some of them actually came to see him. And Willie had learned years before, when there's nowhere to go and nothing to do, no need to get in a hurry to get there and do it. Why, as he saw it, he'd just sit around whittling until something otherwise more urgent came up, but it never did. "Hi, Willie," two boys yelled in unison. It was Jimmy and Jack, the Jameson boys from down the street. Per their usual, they were tossing a football back and forth as they passed Willie's house. Willie stopped whistling long enough to tell them hello and to wish them a pleasant day, and then right back into his whistling and whittling he went. Willie knew what was coming next, rather who was coming next, and he knew what to expect. Despite his age and the respect many people showed him as a result of his vast level of worldly experiences, which included but was not limited to fighting in multiple foreign wars and going places and seeing things that these pampered little privileged kids he lived around, and their parents, equally privileged and pampered for that matter, would never see and would never believe if he told them about his experiences, the next kid that was on his way, Reggie, would show him no respect. Years before, when Willie had been much more social, he'd shared some of his stories from his past with others, only to find that his stories fell on not so much deaf ears, but many uninterested and disbelieving ears. He'd found that after sharing strange and weird tales from around the globe, from both his military days and his days as a civilian poking around in places where people who looked like him, a white American, did not belong, such places as remote third world locations that don't exist on maps, and which had many local tribes of cannibals, witches, and warlocks, and witch doctors, and fantastic and sometimes hideous creatures that were not supposed to exist with his fellow Americans, but Americans who don't share any of his experiences, and again did not believe him due to what they viewed as his sensationalism of his experiences. He'd simply given up. That was a very long sentence to say he's done a lot of shit and nobody believed him. Sorry, that was a little bit too much like Henry James right there. Though long and half a page, it was grammatically correct though, just like Henry James. He'd stopped sharing his stories and he'd taken up whittling and whistling, and that was, of course, long before Anna Marie, the Jameson boys, and even the asshole kid coming next, Reggie, were even born. Hell, it had been before most of their parents had been born. One thing he never told anyone, however, about those odd times and those strange places was the fact that he'd learned a thing or two from some of those witches and warlocks and witch doctors, and at times he acted upon and carried out practices based upon those long ago lessons learned. "Whittle on this, you perverted old bastard." It was Reggie, the rotten apple of the neighborhood bunch, and he delivered the words while launching a stick he'd picked up by the side of the road toward Willie. Reggie ran off, like he always did after insulting Willie and almost always throwing something at him as he did. Willie stepped off his porch and went into the yard and picked up the stick that Reggie had thrown at him. Fortunately for Willie, Reggie's arm was usually off, as it had been on this day, and Willie was glad of it because his days of juking and jiving to avoid being hit by projectiles were long behind him. Willie said, looking at the stick, which happened to be a stick that had fallen from the hickory tree in front of his house. He twirled the stick before his eyes, seeing the small figurine trapped inside just waiting to be brought to life by way of his flex-cut carving knives, not sponsored. And then he said, "I will." "Will you be giving out candy tonight, Willie?" Anna Marie asked on her way past Willie's house. It was the morning of Halloween, and Anna Marie had her ballerina attire on. This was the costume, so to say, she'd chosen to wear for the Halloween festivities at school. Anna Marie, in her mind, however, wasn't wearing a costume at all because she loved to dance and she considered herself to be a real ballerina. Today, she'd simply show her true self to her classmates. I sure will be, sweetie, Willie said, amazed that Halloween had gotten here so quickly. Willie would claim, if asked, that it was true what they say about aging. The older you get, the quicker time flies by. You going to give out big old candy bars again this year? Jack Jameson, along with his brother Jimmy, both now coming up to join Anna Marie, asked Willie. I've got something special for all you kids this year, Willie said. Creeper, Reggie yelled. No one had noticed him, but he was now joining the group. Probably candy bars with razor blades in them, you old pervert. Why, I would never do such a thing, Willie said, smiling from ear to ear as if he weren't affected a bit by Reggie's words. And I'll have something particularly special for you, young man. If there was anything ominous about the tone of Willie's voice, the kids didn't catch it. They all waved goodbye to Willie, all but Reggie, of course. He flipped the bird. And then they made their way to the bus stop, excited for the day's events, but mostly for the events of the upcoming evening. Wow, yeah, I see that. Just standing right there, blazing as could be, right beside that tree, just standing there listening to every word of this story. With just the mention of the fact that Bigfoot Sasquatch Files Volume 14 has been released, now on Amazon and print and Kindle. The sucker's coming out like they think I'm going to tell a story about them. Look at that, duck down just now. I had to get that released because there's a guy here waiting on us here in a couple stories down the road. Oh, a couple days from now, October 24. Revenge is a dish best never served. Originally titled A Shooter's Manifesto. Got an old boy in prison just counting down the days every day before that next Bigfoot Sasquatch Files volume comes out. You'll be hearing his story here in a couple days. All right, but now let me get back into this one about Whistling Willie. Look at that. Dude, do I have to point it out to you? I will. Jeez. You know, I've long since retired my red circles and blue squares and green arrows because I thought you guys have gotten really good at seeing them. I mean, how can you miss it? All right. How's that popcorn and natty light, brah? Will you be giving out... I already read that part. Hold on. Just eat more popcorn and drink another chug there, brah. Trick or treat, Anna Marie said after Willie opened the door. Oh, look at you, he said, looking down at the beautiful ballerina standing on his front porch. Look, he said, reaching into his shirt pocket and pulling something out. What he'd pull out of his pocket was so small that he was able to wrap his hand around it and hide it in its entirety. He bent over and held his hand out toward Anna Marie's face, keeping the small object he'd taken from his pocket hidden, intentionally longer than needed to allow her excitement to grow. After she'd leaned forward as far as she could, nearly touching Willie's knuckles with her nose, and Willie felt he'd kept her waiting in anticipation long enough, he opened his hand and said, "Just for you." Upon sight of her Halloween treat, Anna Marie's mouth gaped, just as wide as her eyes. "It's beautiful," she said. "Take it," Willie said. "I made it just for you." Anna Marie reached out and grabbed the absolutely beautiful little wooden ballerina figurine Willie had carved for her. After allowing the piece to air dry completely, he'd sealed it with shellac, and then he'd painted it with acrylics. Anna Marie held the figurine even closer to her eyes, and upon doing so, saw that Willie had been able to carve the exact likeness of her face into the piece. She'd never seen anything like it. "Just like me," she said, barely audible, though Willie heard it, and he said, "That's right, just like you." The Jameson boys both got little figurines that looked like them in football uniforms. Jimmy's figurine was wearing a Dallas Cowboys uniform, and it had one arm pulled back, ready to pass the tiny little football it held in its hand. Jack's figurine was painted to wear a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform, and the little figurine, the face of which was an exact likeness to Jack's, as Jimmy's figurine's face was an exact likeness of Jimmy's face, had his arms out as if ready to receive a pass. "You actually know our favorite teams," Jimmy said, taking his figurine from Willie and spinning it around in order to appreciate the full detail on all sides. "I pay attention to details," Willie said. "Let's just say it's something that kept me safe in dangerous places, and I figured, well, I may as well keep paying attention now that I'm out of those places and back here." "Let's see mine, you old pervert," Reggie said, pushing his way through the other kids. "Ah," Willie said, reaching back into his shirt pocket and pulling out another tiny treasure, which he kept wrapped tightly inside his hand while extending his hand toward Reggie's face. Yes, the best for last. I hear footsteps again. Look at that. It moved. Look, it's gone. Tree knocks. Man, they're back in full force. At least one. Where'd it go? Watch for it to come back. They're communicating. Oh, there it is. The story must continue. Willie opened his hand, revealing a little exact likeness of Reggie. Reggie's figurine wore a sour look on its face, similar to the sour look Reggie usually wore on his face, and his hands were down at his sides, balled up into fists. However, upon closer inspection of said fists, if one were to make a closer inspection, which Reggie did not, one would find that one fist was closed around a bunch of rocks and the other was closed around a bunch of sharpened sticks. "This is supposed to be me," Reggie said, looking at Willie. The boy was trying to hide his excitement over his Halloween treat because he certainly didn't want to show any sign of acknowledgement of Willie's craftsmanship. Seriously? Seriously, Willie said. They're getting closer. Leaning over and looking Reggie square in the eyes, "And let me tell you, it's just like you." "Thanks, Willie," Anna Marie said, running off the porch, excited to get to the next house. "Yeah, thanks," the Jameson boys yelled. They'd already jumped off the porch too and were running to catch up to Anna Marie. "Thanks for nothing," Reggie said, and then he turned to leave, sliding his hand-carved figurine deep into his pants pocket. After he and the other kids had exited Willie's yard, Willie said, "You won't be thanking me tomorrow, you little piece of shit." Anna Marie got home. They're getting real close. There's another one. Man, keep getting my 6. Anna Marie got more candy trick-or-treating on this Halloween night than she ever had on any Halloween night in previous years. However, her most prized possession was a tiny little ballerina figurine that Willie had carved for her. She placed it on her nightstand where it remained illuminated by the light of the full moon coming through the window after her parents had tucked her in and turned off the lights. Anna Marie's eyes were heavy and she was crashing from her sugar rush, having been allowed to eat more candy than she was usually allowed to eat since it was Halloween night. And just when she reached the point between wakefulness and sleep, she noticed that her tiny little ballerina figurine began to dance. "No way," she thought in her sweet little head. "I must be asleep. It has to be a dream." But it wasn't. But finally, Anna Marie did fall into a deep sleep, and her figurine continued to dance. Jimmy and Jack shared a room, and after coming home from trick-or-treating, eating way too much candy, and getting ready for bed, they'd set their football player figurines Willie had made for them on their dresser in such a way that they looked like they were playing a game of football. One figurine holding its arm back, ready to pass the ball, and the other arm stretched wide, ready to catch the ball, just as Willie had carved them to appear. Both boys watched as their eyes grew heavy. Jack's eyes eventually closed, and he gave way to sleep first, just before Jimmy saw what he swore could not have been real. His little figurine appearing to actually pass the little wooden football into the receiving arms of Jack's figurine. Since he'd fallen asleep just as the pass was released, he didn't see that the other little figurine actually caught the ball and then threw it back. And the figurines did this over and over again all through that Halloween night. "What the?" Reggie said, sitting up in his bed. He'd fallen asleep an hour before, and he was now being awakened by what sounded like someone whistling. It came again, and Reggie looked over to his dresser, where the sound was coming from, and where he'd placed his figurine that he fully intended to throw into the family's fireplace as soon as they started burning wood this coming winter. His eyes reached the dresser just in time to see something small scurry away and run behind a pile of folded, clean laundry that his mother had told him to put in his dresser drawers, but which he had not. "What the?" Reggie said, and just then he was pelted right between the eyes by something small and hard. "Ouch," he said, He felt around on top of his comforter and found a small, hard object. He reached over and turned on the lamp sitting on his nightstand in order to be able to see and inspect this small, hard object. And when he did, he could see that it appeared to be a tiny little piece of hickory wood carved into the shape of a rock. "What the?" he said again, this time, however, trailing off lightly rather than stating the words in... They're grouping together. Rather than stating the words in the bold, bravado-filled manner like he had before, and as his words ended, he felt a sharp sting in his ankle. "Ouch," he said, looking down at his foot, just in time to see the little miniature wooden version of him, which was obviously more like him than he could have imagined, stabbing him with one of the sticks it held in its hand. Reggie shook the blankets as hard as he could, and he saw the little wooden figurine go flying across the room. The only problem was he didn't see where it landed. Reggie got out of bed and went to the far corner of his room where he believed the figurine had landed. He got down on his hands and knees and began looking through all the clutter his mother was always telling him to clean up. Came from behind him, and he turned his head just in time to get pelted with another rock, this time right on the end of his nose. "Damn you," Reggie said, and he scrambled to rise to his feet and cross the room and grab the figurine, but before he could get to it, it was already gone. Once again, it was hiding. Reggie did not sleep a wink that Halloween night. He tried, but every time he'd fall asleep, he'd be stabbed in the foot or in the back or in the cheek by a stick, or he'd be pelted in the face with a rock all by the little figurine that was just like him. And the worst of it, when morning finally came, a school morning at that, the little figurine was still nowhere to be found. "Thanks for my ballerina," Anna Marie shouted at Willie on her way to the bus stop. As per his usual, he was sitting on his porch, whistling and whittling. "You're welcome, sweetheart," Willie said. "I had a dream last night that she was dancing," Anna Marie said, "and it seemed so real." "I bet it did," Willie said, a fox-like smile dancing across his lips. "Yeah, thanks, Willie," the Jameson boys said in unison as they made their way past Willie's house and caught up with Anna Marie. "We've got them set up on our dresser, and it's like they're really playing," Jimmy said. "I bet," Willie said, trying not to laugh. "I'm a little confused, though," Jimmy said, stopping for just a minute before passing entirely. "Which one was holding the ball?" "Oh, I can't remember," Willie said. "You know, the first thing to go with age is your memory." "Oh, okay," Jimmy said. "See ya." Jimmy now double-timed it to catch back up to Anna Marie and his brother, not giving the concern another thought. Willie tried not to laugh even harder as he saw Reggie coming up behind the others. "Where's your little figurine, big fella?" Willie asked Reggie when he got within hearing range of his voice. Reggie looked like he hadn't slept in days, even though it had only been one night of sleep he'd lost. His hair was a wreck, his eyes were red, and he certainly didn't have that mean air of angry energy about him this morning that he usually did, and it appeared as if there were a couple of tiny bruises on his face. "I don't know," Reggie said. He stopped and looked at Willie with what appeared to be pleading eyes. "I can't find it." "Oh," Willie said, looking back down at the stick he'd been carving before the kids had shown up. "I'm sure it'll turn up," he said. "You'll be seeing it again, probably soon." And then he continued whittling and whistling. And the look on Reggie's face, it was the look of mortal terror. The end. So, I might have some company back here getting a little bit too close. So I'm going to go ahead and take off. I hope you enjoyed this story. Tomorrow's is a really good one. Riding with Private Lopez, I think that's one of my best works ever. And on a serious note. And on a serious note, you know, this story reminded me of the email I mentioned I got about the deadbeat mooch bag loser with the popcorn and the natty light. I've mentioned this summer when I was doing final edits on this book. I don't think I've mentioned this during the course of the reading of any of these stories, but when you're a writer, people will often read what you write, and they think that you based a character on them or that you even wrote the entire story about them. All writers, I guess, do that to a very small degree, but not to the degree to which a lot of folks think that we do. I think a lot of folks just consider themselves to be much more important than they really are. What I will tell you about this work as we get closer to Halloween, and this story reminded me of it a lot, just with some past experiences I've had in some odd places. Stories I could tell, but I've stopped telling myself, like Whistling Willie, because folks who have never experienced such things certainly don't believe them, because by God, they never read about it in a textbook or saw it on headline news, so it can't be real. I hope you do not recognize yourself in any of these stories. I truly hope you're not the one, or maybe one of the ones with each new story told each night, who does recognize themselves. And in time, as we draw even closer to Halloween, you will find out exactly why that is. Continue coming back to hear these stories, and you'll soon understand my cryptic message. Go to Amazon and buy Bigfoot Sasquatch Files Volume 14. So that old boy we're going to read about here in a couple days won't be the only one sitting around in his prison cell reading it. See you next time for more.